Oh, no, he came to me.
All right, good evening, everyone. Call the meeting to order. Welcome to our Williamsport City Council meeting. It is Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. We're in Trade and Transit 2. Please rise for the invocation by Councilwoman Bonnie Katz, followed by our flag salute and roll call.
As we meet tonight to serve our city and to use our resources wisely and well, and to make our decisions that promote the common good and recognize our responsibility to our past and our future, the needs of our city. We ask for your blessings tonight that we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Move to item 3, approval of city council meeting minutes from February 16th, 2023. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Hearing see none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 4, limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests tonight. We're going to jump to item 12, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution authorizing the execution of Elm Park lease agreement.
Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Motion and a second. Mayor Slaughter, good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening, President Yoder, Vice President Katz, members of council and administration. What you have before you is a resolution authorizing the execution of an Elm Park lease agreement. This came about unfortunately due to the health of the current folks that have the lease agreement with us. Fortunately, we've had Mr. and Mrs. Clark step up to the plate. They've been very active at Elm Park over the last few years, so they're very familiar with it. And they would like to continue to take care of the park and do a new lease agreement with us. I should thank Mr. Tedesco. He's done a great job over the last few years, making improvements at Elm Park, bringing different events there beyond just softball. So he's done a great job. So I want to thank him and Mr. Noviello. And I look forward to the Clarks, taking it to the next level from here. So, and they are here tonight. If you do have questions for them, there's no changes in this lease agreement. Same as the previous one we had, other than I think we did a 30-day out clause by either party. And this was reviewed in Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. This was reviewed in Public Works, Mrs. Katz.
Yes, it was. First of all, we want to thank you for everything you do with Elm Park. It's an incredible piece of property. Would you like to come up to the podium?
Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. As the mayor said, this really hasn't changed much. The only thing that we want to make sure is that we get a financial report at the end of the year, okay, which we haven't received in the past. That's the only thing that's in the lease that we have that hasn't been accomplished in the past. Other than that, thank you very much for everything you're doing. We do. The other thing is that the signage that goes around the park to make sure that that is approved by the city. Okay.
Okay.
And I think you understand that.
Yes, yes, I do.
Okay. Other than that, that's all we discussed. I would let the rest of the committee if they have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments or questions from other members of council? Mr. Allison.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate all the volunteer work that goes into keeping the park the jewel that it is. It's a great facility. There were some bumps in the road a few years ago and, kind of fell into some disrepair, but it's an excellent place and a real asset to our city. And
I agree.
Just want to just give you thanks and everybody who works on the team to keep it together like that. It's a great thing. Thanks.
What everybody else said. just thanks for the work you're doing. And it's a great partnership. We're thankful to have it.
Thank you. Joe has done a great job and I've learned a lot with him over the last year dealing with the schools and, the travel ball, and hopefully can keep it just where it's at and even take it to the next level of I'd like to bring in some showcases, some college clinics to help the girls fulfill their dreams and goals and get to where they want to get to with the sport of softball. I thank you for your time.
We thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your effort. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing see none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We will jump back to item 5, appointments. We have an appointment. Marshall D. Welsh of 970 Rakestraw Road, Montoursville, appointed to the RVTA board for a 5-year term commencing today and ending on December 31st, 2027. Is there a motion and a second for the appointment? So move motion,
So moved.
second. Motion and a second. Mayor Slaughter.
Yes, good evening again, President Yoder, Vice President Katz, members of council administration. What you have before you is appointment to the River Valley Transit Authority Board, Marshall Welch for consideration. His resume is quite extensive. I obviously will not go over that all tonight, but you do have that, which well prepares him for this board. And just want to thank him again for his willingness to step up and serve in this capacity. I think he will definitely be an asset to the RVTA board. And Marshall was unable to make it tonight, but he was in Public Works on Tuesday where this was reviewed.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. He was interviewed in Public Works,
Yes,
correct?
it was. Yes, he was. And like you said, Mayor, his resume is really extensive, and I think he's going to be a great asset to the board. And anybody that volunteers their time, we're really thankful for. And he really was, it was good that he spoke to us at Public Works. I don't have any other statements.
Any comments or questions?
If I may, I just, again, would like to reflect everybody else's thoughts and sentiments regarding us being lucky enough to have Mr. Welch join the RVTA board. I feel so much more confident knowing with people like this that are helping to steer the new authority that it's certainly in the good hands. So. That's all
Thank
I
you,
wanna say.
Mr. Pelisi.
Mhm.
I did look back at the ordinance as well. And Lauren, we kind of briefly talked about this. Mr. Walsh lives in Montoursville. The way the ordinance is written, whether they're a city resident, they have a business interest or work in the city, that all enables them to serve on the board. So Mr. Walsh meets that. I think he's at an office in
He has
the
a business.
Firestone building. Yeah,
Mhm.
he has a business downtown. So, yeah, absolutely. So, any other comments or questions?
The comment that I'd like to make in regards to the ordinance itself, not this needs to be done tonight, but I think it would be in our best interest and RVTA's best interest if we look at that ordinance and start to look at that language and possibly rework that to residents of the service area that we're providing, RVTA is providing service to. So that way, if somebody's situation changed, their business moves or their employer decides that they're going to move out of the city for whatever particular reason, they're still able to be a valued asset to the community.
That's not a terrible idea. I know when we went through this last year, we had talked about the idea of getting the county involved to some degree and expanding the board. It might be a good time to revisit doing that at some point this year, expand the board, give them some more support. Whether it's the county or changing, either way, I would agree with that. Mayor Slaughter, so the next appointment or if I remember correctly, the next term will end the end of this year
Correct.
because they're staggered, correct?
Right. And then there'll be 5 years.
Okay.
moving forward.
For the public, I mean, it's a long way off. It's a solid 10 months realistically. For anybody in the future who would be interested in potentially serving on the RVTA board, how should they make contact? What should they supply you, et cetera?
Well, they could,
Assuming that the current person
doesn't want to.
doesn't want to or wants to serve again, and assuming that you would like them to, you would bring them forward.
Right. So if the current person doesn't, and I don't remember who the 2-year appointment
I don't either.
is, but they could reach out to my office, they could reach out to members of city council, whatever the case might be, submit their letter of interest, a short resume or bio, nothing extreme, and then obviously we'll make contact to gauge their interest. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Here you see none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item 6, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as part of the various component codes of the codified ordinances of Williamsport, Pennsylvania in first reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Lubin, welcome.
Good evening, President Yoder, members of council. Before you was an annual ordinance that to place into our codified ordinances, the ordinances that were adopted last year. However, as you notice, the transfer ordinances, budget ordinances are not included in our codified ordinances. And then the CO section refers to the codified ordinance section on the right-hand side. And I don't believe this was sent to any council committee.
It was not. It was not. Any comments or questions from members? Okay. Here you see none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, first reading, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0 in first reading. Item 7, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance ARPA transfer number 5 in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mayor Slaughter, welcome back.
yes, good evening again. President Yoder, Vice President Katz, member of council administration, what you have before you in final reading is transfer ordinance number 5, which has a number of different things in it on this final reading here. Not going to rehash all of them, but there's questions I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. We passed this in first reading. This was for the investment in Project Edge. Passed unanimously last week or 2 weeks ago, excuse me. There are a couple of additional changes we should make in second reading here. There is the codes vehicles that we approved 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
I believe. And then there is the court resurfacing that we approved 2 weeks ago as well. We can, and I don't recall if never mind. The proposed changes for the cars are in Dropbox. Mayor Slaughter put that together. We could just amend as noted. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. So I'll make a motion to reduce the following line items in the ARPA budget by the following amounts. Reduce COVID-related expenses by $43,850. Reduce public works future projects by $28,200. And reduce public works contingency by $40,750. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing seen none, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0, and then I'll make a second motion related to this to create under public safety a line item for codes vehicles and allocate $112,800 towards that line item. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Here you see none. Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0, and then we'll take care of the court resurfacing. I believe we were going to take that out of recreation, future projects reserved. So I'll make a motion to reduce the future projects reserve line item of recreation by $759,000.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. Then I'll make a motion to create a new line item in recreation for court resurfacing, sports court resurfacing, and allocate $759,000 to that.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. I think that covers everything, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Any other comments or questions? All right, Mrs. Frank, the main motion and second reading, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion for second reading passes 7-0. Thank you all very much. Mayor Slaughter, thank you. We will move to item 8, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance amending Article 111 of the codified ordinances of the city of Williamsport, setting the compensation of city council in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. So here we are. We had some really good discussion last week regarding the compensation structure. We openly, I think, voted on and agreed to the idea of shifting it to where it's salary and not taking health insurance. We had some discussion about maybe when that would take effect, whether it be staggered by terms switching over or all happening at once when the next cycle happened. Solicitor Lubin sent out some language reflecting what that language should look like if it all happened together, meaning when Councilman Bider, Councilwoman Mealy, and Councilman Allison's terms are up and reset, everything would switch together for all 7 seats. Does anybody have any questions on that? It seemed to me that was where the consensus was to go with that, but if I'm mistaken, by all means, please let me know. Oh, Ms. Mealy, sorry.
I'm in agreement with that consensus, and I think this looks like it represents more or less what we discussed.
Yep.
The one question I would ask is, I don't believe we discussed I believe all of us are currently members of the pension program within the city. Do we want to address that in this ordinance as well?
As far as not
Do we want to drop ourselves from the pension? Do we want to?
will that negatively impact the pension was the question though that we had asked, and I don't know that it will or won't.
You
Mayor
didn't have
Slaughter.
time to look into that, right, Derek? Whether or not it would be a bad thing for the pension plan if we dropped out of it for some reason?
You did, and I don't remember off the top of my head what Tracy said, so my apologies. I could try and get on the phone real quick if you want.
Well, I mean, it would be handy to do it all at one time, but I mean, we are talking about 2 years out anyway for most of these modifications. Theoretically, the pension thing would not be no, but I guess we'd still.
So, Norm, if we would write language in here, removing ourselves from the pension plan, and then after the fact, find out that it actually would negatively impact the pension plan for us to actually pull out, could we go back and take that out after the fact? So if we were to add different language into this, can we go back after the ordinance is passed and remove that language if we don't touch the salaries?
You're changing the salary of elected officials.
Well, we
It
would
might
be
to
though.
Put language in there that, about withdrawing from the pension plan, subject to, because you're part of the O&E pension board, and you're part of that ordinance.
That's true, subject to the approval of the pension board.
Yeah, we could do that.
Right, and then.
And then we can essentially, if we find out we can, that it would not hurt anything, we can write to the pension board And please take a vote to remove us,
Yeah.
document it that way, and then boom. Okay.
I can remember Dr. Hippel was one of the longest members of city council, and his pension when he retired was like $8 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it being a negative impact, but to your point, you
Right.
never know. Yeah, you never know.
There's some sort of bargaining power, and if it relates to the number of individuals involved instead of the amount of actual money involved, then maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are anticipating much of a pension from this.
Okay. Okay. We can come up with something here quick on the fly. So to enact what Norm had put together, we have to amend this anyway, so we can add something into this. That's no problem. Any other comments or questions related to Liz?
Actually, one other question,
Yep.
Norm, it would seem to me that perhaps we should amend section C. It says the city shall not provide health insurance to members of council. It seems to me that perhaps better verbiage might be the city shall not pay for. Because we say in the next, the council members may elect to continue coverage, right? So the city could theoretically still continue to cover council members, but at their own expense, right? So should we say the city shall not pay for health insurance for members of city council and their dependents as of January 1st, 2026? Would that be a more accurate? I'm just trying to avoid any confusion about it.
I didn't see any confusion, but
Okay,
if you want to change it, it really doesn't matter, but
well, I don't know. I guess I just don't want there to be any debate about whether or not council members are allowed to get coverage or whether or not. Yeah, it's pretty clear. It doesn't matter to me. What do we think?
yeah.
If you think that's clear enough and there's no insinuation that council members wouldn't be allowed to have coverage after
No,
that
that's
date,
why
then-
The second sentence is in there.
right.
If-
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Right, Derek?
She didn't do specific, but she can get that to you all via email, but she said it would be nominal. You're talking about 5% or whatever, most won't get vested, so she's like, it would be very,
If
No.
there is an impact, it's very minimal.
yeah, extremely minimal, it would just be 5% or whatever it is, and you figure majority wouldn't ever get to the vested piece, let alone the 20-year piece, but she can get actual, she can email that out, but she said it would be very,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think.
I think we
don't
write it
we
in
really
and then
Care
we're good to
about
go.
precise numbers. My point
Yeah.
is just.
It would
if
be a
could
minimum.
Something really negative that can
No.
come out of it. for some-
it would be a minimal
We're not gonna.
impact.
Yeah.
So I think we write it in there as we had talked about.
Yeah,
I think when we get that final clarification, I would even say we pass a resolution stating that sends that to the O&E board. That way, for it to be overturned, a future council would have to openly do that.
Yeah.
I think for transparency's sake, that's a better approach anyway.
probably. Okay, so.
Okay.
language looks like section D.
Yeah, I mean, we can, yeah, I'll do something on the floor. All right, so I'm gonna make a motion to amend the ordinance, and motion to amend that section 1 reads as follows. I'm gonna try to read this off my phone because I cannot get into my email. I can know on my computer. Section 111.03 of the codified ordinances of the city of Williamsport is hereby amended as follows. Section A, the salary of city council members commencing on January 2024 as follows. President of City Council, Vice President of City Council, other members of council. 2024, President 3,500, 2025, President 3,500, 2026, 10,500, 2027, 10,763, 2024, Vice President 3,250, 2025, 3,250, 2026, 10,250, 2027, 10,506. Other members of council, 2024, 3,000, 2025, 3,000, 2026, 10,000, 2027, 10,250. Section B, the city shall make available group health insurance through a PPO, which is consistent to what is provided to employees for the council member effective January 1st, 2020. Council members whose current term of office stated after that date and who elect to receive health insurance through the city will pay 5% of the premium for individual coverage and 10% of the difference between the individual and dependent coverage. Section C, the city shall not provide health insurance to members of city council or their dependents as of January 1st, 2026. Any member of council who elects to continue coverage after that date shall pay to the city the cost of said coverage. Section D, the city shall not enlist members of city council to the O&E pension plan as of January 1st, 2026. Such action shall take effect after a vote by the O&E pension board. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. I hope that works, Norm. Any comments or questions?
That was easy.
There you go. Janice, on the proposed amendment, please.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 7-0. Any other comments or questions related to the ordinance? All right. Nice work, all of you. I appreciate it. Mrs. Frank, on the motion for second reading, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We will move to item 9, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance amending Article 123 of the codified ordinances of the city of Williamsport, setting the compensation of the mayor in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Setting the compensation of the mayor. Nothing has changed since last reading. We didn't change anything. We didn't talk about changing anything. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 10, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance amending Article 120 of the codified ordinances of the city of Williamsport, setting the salary of city treasurer and tax collector in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. We talked about the changes to this one in first reading. This passed unanimously. We did not talk about changing anything aside from what was written. Any comments or questions on this ordinance? Mrs. Katz,
Is it Article 120 or 129?
29.
129.
Yeah.
Jen said 120.
It's written on the agenda as 129. I think the ordinance is written
120.
129.
so we're okay.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. And then finally, item 11, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance amending Article 131 of the codified ordinances of the city of Williamsport, setting the salary of the city controller in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Nothing has changed. We didn't talk about changing anything in this at all. Second reading, any comments or questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion for second reading.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Okay, we'll move to item 13.
Resolution authorizing the execution of Bowman Field usage requirements.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mayor Slaughter, welcome back. I think for the last time.
Yeah, I think, good evening again, President Yoder, Vice President Katz, members of council administration. What you have for you is a resolution to execution of Bowman Field usage agreement. This came about due to Lake Cumming College having a baseball team this year. Penn College has always had one. They initially were preparing to use the chamber fields to play. As we all know, that project has not come to fruition as of yet. And therefore, like Cumming and Penn College were in need of a location for their home games. We reached out to MLB. They graciously granted a significant amount of additional games to be played to accommodate Penn College and like Cumming College. This agreement was reviewed by MLB, basically drafted by MLB and Brightview, which is who they contract with to handle the grounds crew at Bowman Field. And so both Penn College and like Cumming College will be able to use the field. I believe it's an additional 30 games and a few practices during that time. So very grateful, as I said, to Penn College, or excuse me, to MLB for allowing this. It really could have been an issue for Penn College and like Cumming if they did not have a location. So there is a slight increase that to cover the additional grounds crew requirements for these additional games. Both Penn College, like Cumming College, MLB has reviewed it. Everybody's in agreement to move forward with this. And it was reviewed in Public Works. Right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Mary Slaughter, this was reviewed in Public Works.
Yes, this did come to Public Works. One of the things that was really discussed with the field usage was the tarp. The tarp was the big thing. And the colleges are responsible at this point. If there's going to be a chance of rain, they have to have at least 15 people there to put a tarp down on the field and then to take the tarp off. And they have to be ready. This is one of the things that we don't have with high school at this point, because they
Correct.
are not capable of having the time limitations to get to the
Right.
field to do something like that. The other thing that was discussed was the cost that is going to be shared by like Coleman College and Penn College. They will split evenly the additional cost of $13,364, which each will be paying $6,682 a year for this. But other than that, like I said, the biggest thing that was discussed is with the field usage is the tarp.
Thank you, Mrs. Katz. Any other comments or questions related to this item? All right, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Backey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Viter,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mrs. Katz.
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 14, Mrs. Frank.
Resolution authorizing construction services for 2023 street paving project calendar year 2023 to Hall Baker.
Is there a motion and a second?
So move.
Motion and a second. Mr. Sander, good evening, sir.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. We got problems with this thing. I don't know. This is to hire a Glen Hallbaker for our city's paving contract this year. I put this out last fall. And we had 5 bidders, excuse me, ranging from a little over $1 million to 1.5 million. Glen Hallbaker is the low bidder at $1,048,318. So $1,048,318. Not really much to talk about on this. This was discussed 2 weeks ago. You have some of the contractual documents in front of you and also the list of streets that Hallbaker will be paving this year. So
This was reviewed in Public Works 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
I remember 2 weeks ago. This is what comes to us every year, as far as the bids going out and who's going to do the construction. The only thing I think we discussed is to make sure that we are not compliance, but working in conjunction with the water authority and the gas company that making sure that we're not going to cross over
yes.
in any of the streets that we're doing. And that was the only thing that was really discussed with this.
Yes, ma'am. And the water authority reached out to me with some areas that will come into play this year. I've reached out to them recently with 3 years worth of streets to give them many years worth of information so they can be prepared, so they can hit any problem areas ahead of time and we can continue to work well with the water authority and UGI. Actually sent to UGI as well. So
Right.
Yep.
And that's where, so like I said, that's something that comes to us yearly.
Any comments or questions, Ms. Mealy?
what and I apologize for not remembering, what do we have budgeted for streets in 2022? How much funding do we have allotted?
I don't have that in front of me. I can go off our template, our yearly, basically our template, which is 1,026,000.
In other
But
words,
that's from a couple, I don't have the exact one based on this year's budget in front of me, no.
okay, so we don't know whether or not we're within the budgeted amount in 2022 for streets?
Right out, we're standing right here right now. No, I don't know. However, I will can work with the contractor during the year to keep us on budget. So
We're consenting to a contract for $1,048,318. If
Correct.
we don't have that much money in 2022's budget for
I understand.
those streets, how are you going to work with them to keep us in budget if we're telling them we're? gonna
Because
pay
we have
that
the
much money?
ability to reduce the contract by 25%, right within the contract language.
Okay, and that wouldn't screw anything up in terms of other people who are planning to do work in these streets congruent with our reconstruction of them,
No,
like UGI or the
No,
water
we're not.
authority? Okay, and I mean, in the past, we've used ad alternates as a mechanism for that.
Yep.
Why is it that we don't prefer to do that anymore?
I just didn't do it that. I do it with 25%, but I don't know. I grabbed what I utilized was John Grado's previous contract, and I put it out electronically. There was never any ad alternates, but you may be right. I just haven't seen them.
Okay, that definitely is historically what Grado used to do. I'm not sure why they wouldn't have been in the one you pulled, but we always had ad alternates as kind of a way of controlling our costs if we came in over budget on this item. Yeah, I guess, sorry, I thought that question would have been asked previously, but if you could figure out for me how much we had budgeted in 2022 and whether or not we're within that budget, that to me is a question that we should have had answered previous to trying to approve the agreement. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm a little uncomfortable approving an agreement for an amount of money that we're not sure is within the budgeted amount in 2022. But
In previous years, if we start going over the budget, then the streets are cut and they're not done. This is what has happened in previous years. This is why so many times streets have been put back on the list for the next year.
Mhm.
And this is what has happened. And he watches the budget as far as where the money is being spent. And if it does start to cut where it's going to go over the budget, that's when cuts are made.
That's correct. And I'll keep it. This is $1 million contract roughly. Actually, about $80,000 of it is concrete work at Waste Garden that I put in for Waste Garden Commission, which
Right.
is just like, so it's a smidgen under $1 million, actually.
It's not that we ignore the budget. We go up to the point of no return.
Yep.
And that's how it's been done in the past.
right. I understand. I mean, my question is, so how would the contract, are you saying that they might increase the contract amount over the
No,
course of the year?
I'm not going to increase the contract amount. If anything, I'll decrease it. Right in front of me is a template that I generally use for budgeting of street paving. It includes $370,000 in CDBG, 297,000 of state liquid fuels, 24 grand in county liquid fuels, 125 grand in general fund, 155,000 in Act 13, and a little bit for brick street repair, which I'm not going to do.
Oh, you're not doing Brick Street repair this year?
No, not
Why not?
because it's it's a bunch of money for not much benefit.
Even though we put it in the budget
Is it in the
and
budget?
specifically said that that was something we
Yeah.
were committing to?
Okay, then I'll have to do some brick street repair.
Okay,
Yeah, there's 50. Yeah.
yeah, we put 50 in every year, John. Okay, well,
And that totals.
I'm
up
glad
to-
that none of this information is important to you, John, but
It is important to me. That's why I brought it actually. And it
Yeah.
goes up to $1,206,000.
yeah, 1,206,000,
No,
1,026,000, yeah.
$1,026,000.
I guess, Scott, I'm sorry, you're waiting back there. Was there something you wanted to say? Okay. But yeah, I guess all I'm asking is for a little bit of an idea of, you're telling me this is the cost to pave the streets that we are consenting to pave on this document. If we know that that cost is over what we have budgeted, then it would make sense to me to look at that information prior to us reviewing it in this meeting and say, these are the streets that we're going to be removing from this agreement because we are over the budget that we have allotted for 2022. Unless for some reason you have reason to think that it will be cheaper than the quote that they've given us. Or that it's going to go over the quote that they've given us. I mean, this is not a flexible number, right? This is what it will cost for
What it
them to
will
do those
cost.
streets, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So to your point, I mean, realistically, by quick math in my head, I think we're what, $22,000 over budget?
Well, we don't know because we don't actually know what the numbers were for 2022.
I don't have, I don't have the.
Right.
Breaking out. With all 4 or 5 finance sources in front of me. I have a template that I use every year. Gotcha.
And I guess my point is, it seems as though the wiser approach to this might have been to figure out whether or not we were over the budget for 2022 and reduce the streets prior to us voting on the document. But since that hasn't happened, if you could let us know tomorrow morning, Mr. Sander, where we're at with the budget, that would be excellent. Okay.
You want to table this until then or what?
Personally, that would be my preference, just because I would like to know it. That seems to me like important information, but I mean, if nobody else feels that way, I don't really care.
Make the motion.
But I mean, obviously, we're not necessarily going to spend more money, but I guess to me, the conversation becomes, if we're over the budget for 2022, are there funds we can transfer? Do we want to pave all of these streets, or would we prefer to remove streets from the document because we don't have the additional funding allotted? But we can't have that conversation if we don't know where we're at funding wise. If we don't know where we're at with this with this bid in comparison to the funding we have. Right. So I mean, I don't know. It is not a huge issue to me. Sorry, I'm just a little surprised that
We have $1
that we
million
haven't compared it.
in our Act 13 fund, just to let you know, that it's directly applicable to street paving.
Well, so I guess that's kind of the point to me, is that if you knew that we were over budget in this quote, then you could have come to us and the resolution could say, let it be hereby resolved that the additional funds to meet this bid will be transferred from Act 13, overages or something like that, but we don't know that. So we don't know how much money we had, so we can't move forward with that, which just seems sloppy to me.
I don't know at any given time how much money to have. Based on the current financial system, which we're obviously up to.
Well, I understand that, but we do know very clearly how much we allocated in 2022 for streets.
Yes,
That's not really an item for debate. We
You'll
just
have that
simply don't have
information
the number right now.
tomorrow,
Yes,
not tomorrow morning.
right, okay, good. Then, sure, I'm guessing this will fail, but I'll make a motion to table.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Motion in a second. Any comments or questions on the motion to table? Mr. Allison?
Does this affect the future of the contract at all?
Does it affect the contract? No, it affects a start date for one item that I was going to pave this year, which was our splash pad area for ADA accessibility. That's a serious issue. Pushed it back a couple of weeks. Assuming it's only gonna be a couple of weeks, 2 weeks. Other than that, it won't affect it, Still a live bid on the table.
He said no.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
What's the mic issue?
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, John.
Sorry, I just want to be clear. Mr. Sander, you said we would have the money to cover an overage,
Absolutely, yes.
but we're tabling this tonight because that language isn't in the resolution.
My suggestion was that we could make the decision about whether or not we were going to cover the overage if we knew if there was one. And we could authorize it in the resolution so that it didn't have to come back before us necessarily. Although it may have to come before us as a transfer ordinance, it simply depends on the amount of money. But so it would be simpler to know. I mean, hopefully, hey, we have 1.1 million in there. But downside, maybe we had 900,000 for some reason, and those are, and that's a big difference. So and we don't necessarily know. So I don't remember us particularly shorting streets in 2022. There have been years when we cut streets substantially. I don't remember doing that in 2022.
I cut East Street last year just because we were over, just to keep us at budget.
Yeah.
In addition, this contract is structured in a way I can cut the 45%. So right off the bat, this thing turns from slightly under 1 million to 700, slightly under 750,000, which we do have.
No, I'm well aware, John. I honestly, the tabling thing, I don't particularly care about. My point was that seems like information that we should have before we come to a meeting where we're discussing the document. So I would appreciate in future, if you're doing bids, if you come to us and you say, okay, this is what we've allotted for it. This is what it actually came in at. We all know that things are coming in crazy high right now. That's fine, but that's knowing whether or not we have the money to do the project helps us then to plan when we get to next year. You know what I mean? Like last year you cut a street. So next year we say, okay, if we can't amplify the amount of money we're putting into streets, then we will not get the amount of money that we will not get the amount of streets paved that we wanted to, right? But we can't make those decisions if we're not real aware of that happening when it happens.
This is a question of verifying if we're gonna be over or not before we vote to spend the money.
This is a question, I think, of informing us and the administration when we're looking at paving in the 2024 budget, whether or not we need to be budgeting 20% more if we're hoping to accomplish the same amount of paving. And those decisions are partly informed by these discussions, and then being accurate. Yeah, sorry, Scott.
So as far as last year's budget, we'll have to look into that. Everything we have.
Right.
We covered everything. We have. What pages as far as that. We'll have to look at that, but we
Right.
have enough to budget for $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
We can cut up to 25% if we choose to, but we
Right.
will.
Right, well, I guess, but this is not using 2023's funds, and we probably don't want to use 2023's funds because because we also want to pave in 2024 for 2023, right? Or are we hoping to actually get this year's contract let in 2023?
You would have said directly to me, John, make sure I get all these money, this amount. I would have had it.
Yeah, no, I know, John. I just kind of assumed in the past, when we've had these discussions, the city engineer comes and says, this is what we had in 2023 for street paving. The contract came in over, this is what we're looking to do about it, and it just didn't occur to me that that wasn't information you were going to have when we got here. Sorry. I would have asked you if I hadn't thought you were going to know. And so I guess in future, know that I will ask and ideally know, or I will try to ask you ahead of time. But yeah, I just think it's important for us to keep an eye because costs are all over the place right now and we're getting a little less for our money. It's important for us to keep an eye on what we're getting, and know when we think about, like you just told me you had 3 years of streets planned out, right? But if you have to knock 2 streets off of this because we can't afford them, that moves those 2 streets into next year. So then that plan you had for next year, we're knocking 2 streets off of unless we can put more into the budget for next year, right? And the effect keeps going on. And meanwhile, half of what we all hear about is how much people want their streets fixed and their alleys fixed and their and their brick streets fixed, and in order for us to be accurately answering questions about when we're going to get to that stuff, it's important for us to know how far our dollar's going, and whether or not we need to be trying to find monies that don't exist to pave streets, for 2024. So, it's I guess to me that anything like this is not just a conversation about like, okay, here's the RFP, here's the bid. This is what it's worth. It's a conversation about how we're budgeting for that over the next couple of years, right? And how we plan to make certain that we continue paving streets, at least at the rate that we're going to, and what that's going to cost us. Sorry for the lecture. That wasn't my intention. All I really wanted to know was whether or not it was within our budget, but anyway.
And the answer is,
We don't know. But we'll figure it out.
That was easy.
So, anyway.
Sorry. It just seems.
Whatever, anyway, I
Opportunity
don't,
to
I
push
don't
that
care,
button.
I don't care about tabling it. All I'm saying is I think this is what I'm hoping to understand is the larger question of how far is our money going? How are we going to afford to pay a proper number of streets moving forward? And what does that look like in our budget? Because we know our budget's gonna be real hard next year when we start pulling the ARPA funds out of it. So, right.
For all these years that we've been doing street repairs, why is this making so much noise? What's going on?
He says it's the board. We only got a few more items. Let's just work through it.
Yeah.
Scott's.
Even when John Brado was the engineer, in going through this. Every year
You
we've
turn
gone
her
through where streets were done and pushed back when we didn't have the money. Something would come up, an emergency where we didn't have the funding. And every year we go through this. So therefore, the money is there to begin with as it's presented to us as of right now. But say an emergency comes up where there's, instead of doing a half a street, we have to do a whole street from curb to curb or whatever. And so the money is there up, like I said, today. But it may not be there 10 months from now when we're doing the streets. So therefore, there may be a problem. And that's when you start cutting streets. And this is why I can remember Scotty Miller sitting up there, standing up there going on, you cut streets from last year. Why wasn't that done? And it wasn't done because the money wasn't there, because of things that came to us that we had to shift the money around. So this is something that comes, like I said, every year.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. I think we're good to go on it, but I don't vote, so.
Any other comments or questions on the motion to table? All right, Mrs. Frank, on the motion to table, please.
Mr. Allison,
No,
Mr. Mackey,
No.
Mr. Pelisi,
No.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mrs. Katz.
No,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to table fails 4-3. We're back to the main motion. Any other comments or questions on the main motion? Mr. Allison.
just one comment going forward. And I think most of us are aware of this, but just to refresh our memories going forward, I spoke to a couple supervisors from UGI and confirmed with them again that they're not going to have any more big projects in the city for the foreseeable future. They're done with their major main replacements and all of that. So just so that we can begin to prepare ourselves, not just mentally, but economically for the future. It was nice when we had the gas company and the water company, who is still going to be doing major projects. But when we had them both going full bore, we got a lot of paving done that didn't come out of taxpayer money directly. So we're going to be back to the model where we're crunching numbers to get some streets done. Fortunately, a lot have been done, so we have a little cushion. They're going to hold up for a while, but at some point, the city needs a plan going forward if we want to keep up with the paving. So it would be good to have a discussion about that, probably in Public Works at some point, and see what we could realistically do 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
I've actually looked at that. Based on a 10-year life cycle of a wearing course,
Mhm.
I can only ever pave 40% of our streets in the city.
Okay,
So just to let you guys
Yeah.
know.
great. Yeah. So maybe we could talk about that sometime as a discussion item, just in Public Works to, we can become informed about what that means exactly. Hey, thanks, John.
Any other final comments or questions on the main motion, John?
Just for my own curiosity on this list here, why are there some streets here designated with hashtags?
There's
And
just, internal funding source codes for us. paying.
okay, I was just curious.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Bider.
A point of clarification, you had mentioned that there were no plans for Brick Street work this year. Is that something that you can look into, please, with
I
the money
can.
allocated?
I can pull off some streets or sections of streets and do some brick work if it's warranted and desired. No problem whatsoever.
Yeah, considering we allocated money for it, I would appreciate knowing that.
In the last couple of years,
Being
that
done.
had to get pulled off. So I was.
Understood.
Others? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Frank, the main motion, please.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mrs. Katz,
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item 15.
Resolution awarding Fourth Street Design Services to Larson Design Group.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Sander, welcome back.
Thank you. This is, excuse me, a resolution to hire for design services for the Fourth Street block of Basin and Mulberry. I received 9 proposals actually for this design work. You have a screenshot in front of you of the proposals I received, and they ranged 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. There was one that came in at 28,925, and that's the one I'm proposing today from Larson Design Group. So their design services would be for this resolution to hire them for $28,925 for streetscape work along 4th Street from Basin on Mulberry, and also to replace the signal at Mulberry to kind of round out the whole Lycoming College mixed use facility there. This will be paid with 2 state grants, a $906,000 MTF grant we got in 2022 and a $326,000 Green Light Go grant. We also got $1.2 million for this block. There's also a section when Teresa and I were going after the MTF grant. There's a section of Campbell Street from 3rd to 4th. We were going to add some safety lighting on because it was an old initiative back, not old, but before I came here, initiative with the Pathway to Health and never got done. So we're going to add some safety lighting along that corridor. Let me know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sander. I think this was reading public safety, correct?
Yes, it was. I mean, John said it all. This it's part of the ongoing project that we have going on down there. It's going to be paid for by the grants, and because it came through public safety, they're going to be some really safe streets when they're done being
There
paid.
you go. Any other comments or questions? Bonnie?
this is the last portion that we're working on in this area.
Yes, there may be some as we grow out.
As grow out a
As
little
of
bit.
right now, yeah.
I still can't believe you're bringing up Pathway to Health. I thought we were all finished with that.
There's one block that never got.
One block yet. But we are, because of all the projects beforehand, the bids that came in were so much higher. And we were lucky that Larson Design worked on so many different other areas that they already had the blueprints ready to go. And this is why the cost is so minimal in this area at this
They did a
point.
ton of design work ahead of time over the last 10 years for the previous administration. That's why their cost came in so low. I even called them to verify. Is there a typo on your proposal? It is legit.
That's all.
Ms. Mealy?
if the entire project comes in under budget, do we get to keep the money? You said we had something like better than $1 million, right?
1.2, so 906,000 on an MTF grant,
Right,
326,000 on a Green Light Go. If the entire project comes over budget, do we get to keep? the
comes
money?
in
No.
under budget. I
Oh,
guess that's what I'm
under.
asking. What, so,
No.
I mean, so given that the design is $28,000, which frankly is probably a little lower than anticipated, and that I'm assuming we're not gonna manage to spend $1 million on that block and change of 4th Street, right?
So that's-
I said, it seems like that would be an awful lot of money to reconstruct about a block and a little bit more of 4th Street,
Yeah.
right?
It's gonna look
So
really
the
nice.
remaining funds will be returned to the state, right?
If it's not spent yet, we don't get to keep it, no.
Bummer. Well, this is. But just hoping that we could, do, I don't know, actually, are we looking at new signals?
There is gonna be a brand new signal on Mulberry. Actually, this block was discussed for years with PennDOT. Although it's not a PennDOT street, they have no issue with it. We're actually looking to go two-way on that block. So we're gonna have meetings with stakeholders like Pine Ridge, Sons of Italy, anyone else on that block to talk about the fallout or, likes and dislikes of going two-way on that block. With the Pine Ridge's phase 2 of their development there with a parking deck, it'll work out pretty well, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think our goal at one point was to go two-way for Market, right, on all those streets, but we failed at that with PennDOT. But PennDOT seems to be okay with two-way at
And
least
that
for this
is-
block.
Doesn't have an opinion on this section because it's not their road. They said they had no issue with it. If we start using state routes like this one right in front of us,
Yeah.
they do have a lot to say. The two-way pairs work. for moving
Yeah,
traffic.
I remember we did a lot of very expensive traffic studies to wind up with the conclusion that PennDOT had zero interest in letting us do that. Okay, all right. Anyway, it's great to see that Larson can do it so cheaply. Less exciting when we can't get the rest of the money, but still.
I did want to
Great.
point out, there was three that really stood out, three proposals that really stood out to me. Stahl Schaefer, who he's working for,
Mhm.
Dewberry, who currently is designing Willow Street and Larson's, and it's just, I can't say no to that cheap of a price, especially when it's tax dollars.
Well, and I mean, do we have any particularly large plans for this? It's just all the standard stuff in the street,
Standard
correct?
streetscape,
Yeah.
beautification, nothing major on it, no,
And then the new signal, but
And-
yeah.
two-way traffic with a new signal.
Mhm. Yeah, so good. That's excellent. That's cheap for converting the traffic pattern. That is foreseen, correct?
That is.
They know that they know that we are converting the traffic.
was in the
pattern as part of
RFP,
that.
yes,
Yeah, I thought I saw that in there. But okay, all right, thanks, John.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Viter,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mrs. Katz,
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, John.
Yes.
We'll move to item 16.
Resolution to approve change order number 1 between the Williamsport Bureau of Fire and Lundy Construction.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Chief Funks, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Tonight I come to you, claiming, that back on December 15th, you for the, approval of the. We budgeted 13,000 for that project, 30,000 for the project. And, it came in at $24,280. However, there was, three different items that need to be addressed, and added and replaced. That includes the addition of a cabinet and counter for the talk area that was included in the, a boxing backsplash, including the cut of it. And the replacement of the countertops that we put in for, and that saves us $3 million. And the full countertops are a lot more durable. The last time the kitchen was renovated, when we got rid of the actual kitchen and the dining area, the kitchen and the multi-purpose recycling and so this is not a facility and the overall budget, the overall cost now is $27,218. And that's a difference of $2,931.
Thank you, Chief. This was reviewed in public safety.
Yes, it was. Chief, again, just to be clear, we're 2,000 over, right? Not 2,000 under, correct? Right. Right. Okay, yeah. I just wanted to make that clear for the public, but yeah, this was discussed in public safety. Again, really not a lot to talk about here. If you've spent any time at the kitchen at the fire department, you know it's in desperate need of some work. So I'll defer to any other people in public safety that want to mention anything or.
Mrs. Katz?
one of the things that we did discuss is that there's nothing to be salvaged that can be given away to somebody else to use. The cabinets, like you said, are 30 years old and everything is starting to fall apart. And what you've come up with, like you said, the quartz countertops, which is much better than what was first with the quarry, and that is not sustainable. And I found out what the epoxy paint backsplash was, which I thought was really fascinating. Good job, with what's going on here. And I think everybody's going, in the fire department's going to appreciate this. It's. Thank you, Chief.
Any other comments or questions? You can see none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mrs. Katz,
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 17.
Resolution authorizing the purchase of Or Fusion anti-spam solution from Cleaver Bridge Incorporated.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Mr. Black.
Good evening, President Yoder, Vice President Katz, other members of council. What you have for you is a resolution for the purchase of ORF Fusion software. It is the software that we use to block as much spam emails that we have coming in. And we're purchasing this through a company called Clever Bridge out of Chicago. When I first went on and got the numbers for this, for budget purposes, I found $1,375. Actual price is coming in now at $576. But on April 1st, it will go up to $800 if we don't purchase before that.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
This was reviewed by council.
By Public Safety. Yep.
Yes, it was.
You're going to become an IT expert.
Yep.
And a contracting expert.
You got it.
Whatever it takes.
No, I mean, Chris said it all. Bottom line is came in way less than we thought it was going to be, but if we don't purchase it now, which seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of stuff,
Lately.
it's going to go up. So
Where are we
Timing's
living
everything.
right now? Where are we living right now? Thank you.
yeah, if anybody else, public safety.
Mrs.
sure.
Katz.
on the resolution, Chris, it says 576 odd thousand, but on the invoice itself is 610,000.
Yeah, they haven't received our tax exempt yet.
610. Okay, but it's going to go, it's
Oh,
going to
yeah,
go.
it will be the 576.
Okay,
We
that's
won't
what I wanted to
spend-
clarify with this.
Yeah, I won't pay taxes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'd almost just like to ask Mr. Black to say that one more time. He's not gonna pay taxes on it. To hear somebody say that and it actually be law abiding, I just find refreshing.
No comment.
All right, no other questions. Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
yes,
Mrs. Katz,
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 18, except for filing the Finance Committee minutes from November 1st, 2022, and the Controller's Report from December 31st, 2022. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Here you can see none. Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
yes,
Mrs. Katz,
yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 19, announcements. Our next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be on Thursday, March 26th, 7 PM right here in Train Transit 2. Our upcoming meetings, Monday, March 6th, 12 PM is our planning commission, 4:30 PM Veterans Memorial Park. Wednesday, March 9th, 3:30 PM O&E pension. Tuesday, March 14th, 11:30 AM Public Safety, 1 PM Finance, 2:30 PM Public Works. Wednesday, March 15th, 9 AM is our economic revitalization, 10 AM blighted property. Thursday, March 16th, 10:30 AM zoning hearing board, and 7 PM is our city council meeting. Are there any comments from members of council this evening? I would commend our public safety personnel, our police and fire. So last week with the response to the hospital getting out of power, they did a commendable job. So thank you both all very much for what you do. We're grateful and appreciate it. So, Norm.
Yeah, I'd like to request a scheduling of police pension board meeting after next after the next city council meeting on March the 16th. And also to have a brief executive session before the Penguin Board meeting on a matter of personnel.
Okay. Sounds good. Can we do that executive session like not this, like, can we do it like next week instead of before the meeting if we wanted to?
We can do it that way too.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Norm. Any other comments from members of council? Mr. Biter?
Is Mr. Livermore still here?
No, you had to go pick up.
Did he share any information with you, Mayor?
Uh,
I just, my curiosity question that I asked him before the meeting that I think the public is probably getting ready to start with outdoor projects and when spring cleanup was going to be, I believe it was the end of the month. He had said, but I just wanted to be sure on that. As the weather gets nicer, I'm sure that streets are going to be inundated with all the things that have fallen over the winter.
right. Yeah, I believe it starts in a month, but I'll clarify and we can say in 2 weeks when I think it is the end of the month. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Any comments from the administration?
Yeah. And then I was just going to say what you said about UPMC, so I'll just echo the sentiments there.
Hear, hear.
Everybody did a great job.
Here.
City Council, real quick, just want to give notification that our Williamsport Bureau of Police is now outfitted with body cameras. We initiated our program yesterday. So that's out there started. So now when you have an encounter with the police officer from Williamsport, they'll be outfitted with the body camera. As I said before, when we talk about this is we're gonna put our policy out on Crime Watch. Hopefully it's out there by tomorrow for the community to view. Anybody who wants to view it,
Nice.
see what the policy is and what we're gonna do about it. I know it warranted a lot of questions. There's some, so this will help with that. I'll be able to answer any questions if anybody has anything. I did want to say thank you to council. We want to say thank you to the administration for the allocation of ARPA funding, which helped us procure the body cams and get this program initiated. So if you have any questions, try to answer them for you. Thank you though.
Thank you, Chief. It's good to see him up and running and excited to see how that helps us improve the department, improve our services, et cetera. Well done. Any other comments from the administration? Chief?
Really good. I just wanted to thank Councilman Mackey and Councilman Foley for your assistance. On Thursday night, there was
Thank you both. Any comments from the public? I don't think there is. Any comments from the news media? I don't think there is either. All right, motion is second for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn, or motion, meeting adjourned. Have a good evening, all. Thank you.